In the city archive of Budapest, I first saw the photograph by accident. It was labelled in neat blue ink, Széchenyi Chain Bridge, completed 1849, Danube Central Span. An ordinary catalogue card, an ordinary 19th century suspension bridge. The shot itself was earlier than most, taken around 1855 from the Pest embankment. The steel chains hang in a perfect catenary, the stone pylons rise in impossible symmetry, but at the base of the left pylon, half hidden in shadow, a sealed archway appears where none exists today. A later renovation plan, dated 1913, calls it redundant substructure to be filled. On another shelf in the same room, an atlas from the 1820s labels half of Inner Asia simply as Great Tartary. Since then, whenever I look at that sealed arch, I hear some researchers whisper a different phrase, Tartarian infrastructure. I return to the photograph the following morning. The archive reading room is nearly empty, light falling in long slats across the wooden tables. I handle the print carefully, turning it to catch different angles. The image shows the chain bridge perhaps 6 years after its official completion. The Pest side of the Danube, visible in soft focus behind the nearer pylon. William Tierney Clark's design is unmistakable. The twin stone towers, the suspension chains, the roadway deck, everything matches the official narrative, except the base. At the waterline where the pylon meets its foundation, the photograph captures what appears to be a low archway framed in darker stone. The opening is perhaps 2 meters wide, its keystone barely visible. I compare it to a modern photograph I took myself last week, standing on the embankment in roughly the same position. The arch is gone. In its place, smooth masonry unbroken. The 1913 renovation drawing I found yesterday confirms the change. A small annotation in German script reads, redundante Unterstruktur auszufüllen, which means redundant substructure to be filled. No explanation of what made it redundant or what purpose it originally served. Later that afternoon, I stand on the riverbank matching the camera angle, same pylons, same chains, same Danube flowing beneath, but no visible arch at the base. The massive masonry implied by that sealed opening suggests something older than a 19th century river crossing. Tartarian researchers obsess over such details, sealed arches, half-buried ground levels, what they call mud flood artifacts. I am not convinced, but I leave the bridge with one question. If that pylon base does not belong to 1849, then whose bridge am I actually standing on? The official history is not difficult to find. The Széchenyi Chain Bridge, opened November 1849, was the first permanent stone bridge connecting Buda and Pest. It was designed by William Tierney Clark, built under the supervision of Scottish engineer Adam Clark, and funded by Count Istvan Széchenyi. A national symbol, destroyed in the Second World War, rebuilt afterward. The story is clean, patriotic, complete. I spent 3 days in the National Engineering Library and Municipal Records Office, working through construction contracts, cost estimates, and period engravings. The documents align perfectly with the narrative. Budgets itemize stone, iron, and labor. Engravings show the pylons rising from wooden cofferdams. Letters between the Clarks discuss chain tensioning and deck alignment. None of them mention a pre-existing river footing. None reference any substructure that would later need to be sealed. I compare early lithographs. In one from 1842, before construction was complete, the pylons are sketched with a rough base that looks older than the rest, darker stone and less regular coursing. Later images smooth that out. By the 1860s, the base appears uniform with the upper structure. The transition is subtle, but once I see it, I cannot unsee it. On the archive map shelves, I find what Tartarian researchers always point to: 19th century atlases still label vast Eurasian spaces as Tartary. A French atlas from 1828 shows Grande Tartarian stretching from the Volga to the Pacific. Modern researchers argue that much Victorian infrastructure sits atop Tartarian foundations, that what we call 19th century engineering was often adaptation, not creation. If the chain bridge's foundations were reused, someone chose not to write that sentence. The omission bothers me more than any conspiracy theory. I return to the bridge with a measuring tape and a camera. The morning is cold, the Danube grey beneath low clouds. I walk the full length of the span twice, photographing the pylons from every accessible angle. The upper structure feels 19th century, cast iron, riveted joints, the particular aesthetic of early industrial engineering. But the base feels different. The lower courses of the pylons are cut from limestone blocks that dwarf the upper stones. Their surfaces are smoother, their joints tighter. I photograph a section where the two stone types meet. The weathering patterns suggest two distinct ages stacked together, the lower stones darker and more eroded, as if they had been exposed to the elements for far longer. Back at my apartment that night, I overlay an 1855 photograph with a modern laser scan published by a Hungarian structural engineering firm. The pylon spacing matches exactly, the chain sag matches exactly, but the scan shows the current waterline nearly 1 meter higher than in the old photograph, meaning whatever existed at the original base level is now permanently submerged or buried. I find an elevation drawing in the archive, dated 1847, showing the planned pier width and foundation depth. The numbers are impressive. Foundation stones weighing several tons each are set into the riverbed with tolerances that would be difficult even with 20th century diamond tooling. For mid-19th century hand methods, working in a fast-flowing river, the precision seems unlikely. Tartarian researchers highlight such impossible precision in their analysis of red brick complexes and domed halls worldwide. Here, the chain bridge begins to fit their pattern uncomfortably well. The upper bridge feels Victorian, the base feels older. It is as if I am looking at two different builders shaking hands in stone. Months later, I am in St. Petersburg, then Nizhny Novgorod, following the term Tartary back onto its own maps. An old atlas in the Russian National Library still shades Siberia as Tataria, the Cyrillic script faded but legible. The borders are vague, the territory immense. This was not a country in the modern sense, but a cartographic acknowledgement of lands that European mapmakers did not fully understand. I photograph bridges. The Annunciation Bridge over the Neva, officially completed in 1850, rail bridges along the Trans-Siberian line dated to the 1890s. In each case, the official narrative is clear: Russian imperial engineering, European consultants, documented construction. In each case, something does not fit. At the Annunciation Bridge, I find sealed arches beneath road level, visible only from a maintenance walkway I talk my way onto. The stonework is identical to what I saw in Budapest: precision-cut blocks, tight joints, a darker tone than the upper structure. At a rail bridge near Nizhny Novgorod, the abutments show the same pattern, with massive lower courses supporting a lighter superstructure, and bricked-up openings at waterline that no current documentation explains. A repeating architectural motif emerges: a narrow arch, roughly 2 meters wide, framed in precision-cut stone, now sealed with later brickwork. I photographed 3 examples in Russia alone. Tartarian enthusiasts call these service portals for a hydraulic network they believe once spanned Eurasia. I remain cautious. The pattern is there. Different cities, different architects, different decades, the same hidden doorway. Officially, coincidence. Architecturally, a signature. I spend 2 weeks in London and Paris, working through engineering journals from the 1860s to the 1880s. The reading rooms are quiet, the microfilm machines humming softly. I am looking for documentation of how these bridges were actually built, what tools, what methods, what equipment. The journals celebrate new iron bridges with detailed articles. Debates over riveted versus bolted joints fill entire issues. Engravings show steam cranes, floating derricks, wooden scaffolding. The technology is impressive for its time, but limited in ways the writers themselves acknowledge. I compare the documented lifting capacities to the mass of some foundation stones I have measured in photographs. A modern structural analysis of the chain bridge estimates individual pier stones at 4 to 6 tons. The largest steam cranes of the 1840s could lift perhaps 3 tons under ideal conditions. Working over water, in current, the practical limit was lower. The numbers do not align easily. In a French engineering journal from 1879, I find an almost casual admission. Discussing a major bridge in the Caucasus, the author notes that existing river masonry was adapted where appropriate, with no further detail or explanation of what existing meant or who had built it. Tartarian researchers seize on such phrases, asserting that existing river masonry equals Tartarian civil works. I remain cautious, but I cannot deny the pattern. Detailed descriptions of superstructures, vague acknowledgements of foundations. The journals describe girders and chains in loving detail. They glide past the question of what exactly those new structures were anchored into. Back at my desk, I begin mapping. I plot every anomalous bridge foundation I have documented against historical floodplains and waterworks. A pattern emerges that I did not expect. Many of the sealed arches and oversized foundations align not just with rivers, but with former canals and mill races long since filled. In Budapest, a 19th century city plan shows now vanished side channels running under and near the chain bridge, with small symbols marking valves or sluices. The symbols are unexplained in the map legend. Modern infrastructure maps show nothing in those locations. I review Tartarian literature more carefully. The claims are bold that many bridges doubled as nodes in a pressurized water or energy network, that Tartarian systems used hydraulic differentials at scale, that the sealed chambers I keep finding were not structural but functional. I do not accept the whole package. But the focus on hydraulics suddenly seems less arbitrary than I initially assumed. At 3 bridge sites I have visited, I photographed details that do not fit standard explanations. Sealed culverts with no apparent drainage purpose, forgotten inspection wells capped with iron plates, manholes near abutments that lead nowhere. At the chain bridge, a municipal worker I speak with mentions old pipes encountered during a 1990s renovation, pipes that were not on any plan, running into the pylon base, subsequently sealed with concrete. If these were only foundations, why did so many of them need what look like access points for water that no longer flows? I shift my focus to 20th century renovation records. These documents are less romantic than the original construction files, maintenance schedules, repair budgets, engineering assessments, but they contain details the earlier sources omit. The language repeats across multiple archives. Remove obsolete mechanism, fill redundant void, seal access shaft. The phrases appear in renovation documents for bridges across Europe, always without explanation of what the original mechanisms were or why they had become obsolete. These records keep returning the same unexplained actions. In Budapest, I find a black and white photograph from a Danube bridge repair in the 1950s. Workers stand beside a rusted iron assembly inside the pylon base. Pipes, wheel-like structures, what might be a valve housing. The image suggests an old mechanical system that someone later dismantled or sealed, and it raises questions about what those sealed spaces once did. The assembly in that photograph is a small, stubborn clue. The photograph has no caption. A later document notes the space was cleared and filled during the same renovation. In a Russian archive, a maintenance log for a Volga bridge records removal of unknown cast iron devices from the lower chamber. The entry is dated 1962. Alternative researchers immediately label these remnants Tartarian machines. I am not ready to use that phrase. I write unknown cast iron devices into my notebook and circle it twice. The evidence accumulates: sealed chambers, removed machinery, documentation that acknowledges the existence of systems while refusing to explain them. Bridges were built to carry traffic. Someone, at some earlier point, seems to have built them to do something else as well. I widen the investigation. If the patterns I have found in Budapest and Russia are coincidental, they should not repeat elsewhere. If they are not coincidental, they should appear wherever 19th century engineers claim to build major river crossings from scratch. I spend weeks comparing historic star-shaped fortresses, another favorite Tartarian motif, against river networks and bridge locations. The overlay is unsettling. Several major bridges sit precisely on former bastion points, their pylons aligned with the geometry of fortifications that officially predate them by centuries. An 18th century plan of a star fort in the Austrian archives shows a central water gate, a controlled channel running through the fortification's heart. A later railway bridge completed in 1867 spans the same exact alignment. The bridge's official history mentions nothing about the star fort. The star fort's records mention nothing about hydraulic infrastructure. Yet the alignment matches perfectly, as if someone had simply replaced one structure with another while preserving the underlying orientation. I photographed street plans near several bridge sites. The grids show consistent patterns, streets radiating at specific angles, blocks sized to identical proportions, pylons oriented to cardinal directions within a degree of precision. The consistency spans cities that had no documented communication during the construction periods. Tartarian theorists argue these star forts were not merely military installations, but energy or water handling complexes, nodes in a network whose purpose has been forgotten or suppressed. If that theory holds, reuse of their positions for bridges would be logical. The strongest points of a vanished network would naturally become the anchor points for whatever came next. Either later engineers had an uncanny habit of planting their bridges on the strongest points of that network, or they were, knowingly or not, inheriting Tartarian ground. I narrow my focus to case studies chosen for geographic spread and documentary availability: the Szechenyi Chain Bridge in Budapest, a Volga railway bridge near Samara, Russia, completed in 1880, and a lesser-known red brick viaduct in Bohemia, dated to 1872. For each structure, I compile parallel files: official construction date, named engineers, documented equipment, and surviving photographs of foundation work. The exercise takes months. The pattern that emerges is worth the time. Across all three bridges, certain anomalies repeat with uncomfortable consistency. The lower courses of each structure are over-dimensioned, stones or bricks far larger than necessary for the loads they carry, cut with precision that exceeds nearby civic buildings from the same era. At each site, sealed arches appear at bank level, visible in early photographs, but absent from modern views. Renovation records for all three mention filling or decommissioning of low chambers, always without explaining what those chambers originally contained. In the Russian archives, I find a memo from an engineer working on the Samara Bridge. He complains that existing works constrained his design options, forcing modifications to the planned pylon placement. No further detail about what those existing works were or who had built them. In Bohemia, municipal records preserve a debate over the cost of infilling unnecessary voids in an old river pier that the viaduct was built upon. The debate is about money, not history. No one asks why the voids exist. I map these details side by side. The architectural DNA is unmistakable, identical signatures appearing in structures built decades apart, in different languages under different political regimes, with the same reluctance to describe what lay under the waterline. Enthusiasts would simply call this the Tartarian layer. I am beginning to understand why. I return to the photographs. 19th century construction photography was a point of pride. Engineers documented their achievements in careful detail, producing images meant to showcase technological progress. Steam cranes, wooden scaffolding, suspension cables under tension. The photographs are beautiful, technically accomplished, and revealing in ways their makers did not intend. I examine a well-known series showing the chain bridge's deck under construction. The images capture workers on suspended platforms, chain links being connected, the roadway taking shape between the pylons, beautiful documentation of a suspension bridge being assembled. But in several photographs, the deck and pylons already exist in near-finished form before any heavy lifting machinery is visible. The timeline implied by the images does not match the official construction narrative. The massive foundation work that must have preceded the visible construction is simply absent from the visual record. I cross-reference with other bridge sites. The pattern holds. Photographs show superstructures being assembled atop foundations that appear already complete. The tools capable of placing multi-ton stones in fast-flowing rivers, large-capacity floating cranes, block and tackle arrays robust enough for the documented weights do not appear. Period equipment catalogues confirm what the photographs suggest. The largest commercially available cranes of the 1840s and the 1850s could not have handled the foundation stones that geological surveys indicate are present beneath these bridges. The lifting capacity simply was not there. Tartarian researchers interpret this as proof of lost impossible tools, technology from an earlier civilization that has been erased from history. I phrase it more carefully. The tools capable of doing that work are missing from the visual record. We have the results, but not the means. The photographs were meant to glorify progress. They inadvertently recorded something else, a gap between what we say we built with and what the stones silently insist upon. I begin visiting sites that tourists never see. Basements, service corridors, municipal tunnels, running beneath roads that lead to major bridges. In most cities, these spaces require permits, explanations, sometimes bribes. The effort is worth it. In Budapest, I walk through a low, damp passage that now carries electrical cables and sewage pipes. The tunnel runs straight toward the chain bridge's eastern abutment, then abruptly dead ends at a bricked wall. The brickwork is newer than the surrounding stone, 20th century perhaps, laid in a hurry. Beyond it, according to the passage's original trajectory, should be the pylon base itself. A 19th century map in the city archive labels this same passage as a water conduit. No specification of what water or for what purpose. The passage predates the bridge's official construction date by at least 2 decades. Either the map is wrong or the conduit was incorporated into a structure that supposedly did not yet exist. In Prague, I find identical brick herringbone patterns in tunnels leading to 3 separate river crossings. Old iron brackets line the walls at regular intervals, serving no current function. At shoulder height, sealed circular openings, perhaps 20 centimeters in diameter, appear every few meters, their purpose undocumented. In Vienna, a municipal worker shows me a sub-level beneath a bridge abutment that his department has been forbidden to enter since the 1970s. The door is welded shut. He does not know why. I compare my photographs to drawings circulating in Tartarian communities online, speculative diagrams of a global hydraulic grid, pressure systems, distribution networks. My own images, taken in places the public rarely sees, uncomfortably resemble some of those sketches. The Tartarian sketches are not proof, but the resemblance is striking. Whatever those passages once carried, whether water, steam, or something else entirely, the deliberate erasure of those conduits seems as systematic as their original design. Someone built them with purpose. Someone else sealed them without explanation. I return to my desk and begin the synthesis. The evidence spreads across 3 countries, dozens of archives, hundreds of photographs. None of it proves a Tartarian civilization existed. All of it strains the official accounts of purely 19th century construction. I list what I have documented: reused foundations that predate their supposed structures, sealed arches visible in early photographs and absent from modern views, undocumented iron assemblies removed during renovations, described only as unknown or obsolete, tools missing from the visual and documentary record that would have been necessary for the work attributed to period engineers, erased sublevels and conduits running to bridge abutments, their original purpose unrecorded. Each piece of evidence taken alone might be explained away: archival error, photographic ambiguity, routine renovation, bureaucratic indifference to historical detail. But the pattern repeats across borders, across languages, across political regimes, across decades that had no mechanism for coordination. The consistency is what unsettles me most. I frame Tartaria carefully in my notes. As a geographic term, it appears on European maps from the 16th through 19th centuries, labeling vast Eurasian territories that Western cartographers did not fully understand. The borders shifted with each atlas. The populations within were described vaguely, often contradictorily. By the mid-19th century, the term disappeared from serious cartography, replaced by Russian provinces, Chinese territories, familiar borders. As a modern concept among alternative researchers, Tartaria has become shorthand for a suspected prior layer of high engineering, a civilization whose infrastructure was inherited, adapted, and eventually erased by those who came after. The theory is dismissed by mainstream historians as fantasy, as pattern matching run amok, as the kind of thinking that sees hidden civilizations where simpler explanations suffice. I understand the dismissal, I shared it once, but I have now spent months in archives that the dismissers have not visited, photographing details they have not examined, reading renovation records they have not requested. I acknowledge the limits of the archive. Wars have destroyed records across Europe and Asia. Regime changes have reshuffled bureaucracies, reclassified documents, buried inconvenient questions. Simple institutional disinterest has allowed papers to rot in basements, photographs to fade in uncatalogued boxes. What remains, stubbornly, is the stone. The physical evidence does not care about historical narratives, it simply exists. Foundations too massive for documented equipment, precision too perfect for documented methods, systems too advanced for documented technology, all attributed to an era that could not have produced them without capabilities it officially did not possess. If we strip away the word Tartarian and simply ask whether our bridges sit on someone else's forgotten work, the evidence stops feeling fringe. It starts feeling uncomfortably ordinary, the kind of inheritance that happens whenever one civilization builds atop another's ruins. Late at night, I return to the Budapest archive. The reading room is empty except for a single lamp at my table. The city outside is quiet, the Danube invisible beyond the windows. I have requested the same folder I examined months ago when this investigation began. The photograph lies before me again. The grain of the paper catches the lamplight, each silver halide crystal holding its fragment of 1855. The image shows the chain bridge 6 years after its official completion. The Danube flows beneath in a soft grey blur, the current frozen mid-motion. The pylons rise in their familiar symmetry, chains hanging in that perfect, catenary curve that made William Tierney Clark famous. Everything matches the official narrative, the design of Clark, the engineering supervision of Adam Clark, the national pride of a newly connected capital. A triumph of 19th century engineering, a symbol of Hungarian modernization. My eye goes straight to the sealed arch at the base of the left pylon. It is half in shadow, half in light, exactly as I remember. The keystone is barely visible beneath the waterline shadow. The darker stone framing the opening does not match the courses above it. Different color, different weathering, different age. In the photograph, the arch appears functional, an entrance, a passage, an access point to something below the roadway, below the waterline, below the official history. The catalogue card beside the print still reads in neat blue ink, Széchenyi Chain Bridge, completed 1849, Danube central span. No mention of anything earlier, no acknowledgement that the foundation might predate the superstructure by decades or centuries, no explanation of what was later sealed and filled. I recall a conversation with a building conservator I met during this research. We were discussing a different structure entirely, a municipal building in Vienna with anomalous basement levels, but his words have stayed with me. He said, "Sometimes we build on what is there, almost offhand, as if stating the obvious. The paperwork rarely bothers to say whose it was." I close the folder slowly. The archive will close soon. The archivist has already dimmed the lights in the adjacent reading room. I will walk home along the embankment, past the chain bridge, past the exact spot where that photograph was taken more than a century and a half ago. The pylons will be lit with modern floodlights. The sealed arch will be invisible beneath the waterline, beneath the renovations, beneath the layers of stone and concrete that have accumulated since 1913. But in my mind, the arch remains. I have spent months documenting patterns that should not exist if the official histories are complete. Sealed chambers across 3 countries, erased sublevels in half a dozen cities, impossible precision repeated in structures that supposedly had no connection, global architectural signatures appearing in an era before international engineering standards, before reliable long-distance communication, before any mechanism that could explain such consistency. The official histories describe 19th century triumph. The physical evidence describes inheritance. The renovation records describe erasure. Together they suggest a story that no one has fully told, that much of what we call Victorian infrastructure was not built from nothing, but adapted from something older, something whose origins were not recorded because recording them would raise questions no one wanted to answer. Tartarian researchers have been pointing at these patterns for years. They have been dismissed as fringe theorists, as conspiracy enthusiasts, as people who mistake coincidence for connection. I understand the dismissal. I shared it once before I started opening the folders myself. But I have stood in the tunnels that run to bridge abutments and dead end at bricked walls. I have photographed the sealed arches that appear in 19th century images and vanish from 20th century views. I have read the renovation records that acknowledge unknown cast iron devices and redundant substructures and obsolete mechanisms without ever explaining what was being removed or why it was there in the first place. The evidence does not prove a Tartarian civilization. It does not need to. It only needs to show that the official story is incomplete, that something existed before what we call the beginning, and that someone, at some point, chose not to record what it was. The sealed arch in the photograph is ordinary in a sense. A small architectural detail, half hidden in shadow, easily overlooked by anyone not looking for it. Thousands of people have seen this image in the archive collection, Few have asked what that opening was or why it no longer exists, but it is also a doorway, not into a physical space perhaps, but into a question that the archive cannot answer and the official histories do not ask. I think of the atlas on the shelf nearby, the one from the 1820s that labels half of Inner Asia as Great Tartary. The label disappeared from maps within a few decades, replaced by Russian guberniyas and Chinese provinces, by borders that made sense to European bureaucracies, by categories more comfortable than the vast unknown that Great Tartary had represented. The word became archaic, then obscure, then the province of alternative researchers whom serious historians ignore. But the stone remains, the sealed arches remain, the patterns remain in Budapest and St. Petersburg, in Samara and Prague and Vienna, in cities that had no documented connection during the construction periods but somehow produced identical architectural signatures. And whenever I look at that photograph, the chain bridge in 1855, the Danube flowing beneath, the perfect symmetry of the pylons, the dark opening at the base that no longer exists, I hear the question that started this investigation still unanswered. After all these months of research, if the foundation does not belong to 1849, then whose bridge am I actually standing on? The archive offers no reply. The catalogue card offers no revision. The sealed arch, half in shadow, half in light, keeps its silence as it has kept it for more than a century. And across continents, identical signatures appear in structures built decades apart under different flags by engineers who never met in an age when such coordination should have been impossible, unless someone else had been there first.